welcome to Metro. We're glad to have you in the house. Glad to have you tuning in online as we come to a close in this Living the Dream series. I hope you've been enjoying it. My name is Seth Conerly. I'm one of the pastors on staff here, and I'm excited to kind of bring this to its culmination, if you will. We've been talking all about what it even means to live the dream, people, and I don't know about you, but every time somebody tells me that, I had no idea, is what it boils down to. Everybody says, how you doing? I'm living the dream. Oh, what does that even mean, right? And so as I began to think about that and process it, I wanted to know what it meant to live the dream, and far more importantly, what it looked like as a follower of Christ to follow a dream that is fulfilling, ultimately, and God-glorifying. And interestingly enough, those two have to come hand in hand if we want to pursue a dream that is in fact fulfilling. So the first thing we looked at was our motivation. And is our dream one that is about God, or is it more about self-gratification and more about you and what you want? It's not about others, it's not about God, it's really just kind of, I want to get mine, I want to be awesome, I want to be famous, I want to have a lot of money, I want to, whatever your thing is, right? Maybe beyond that, it's not even an instance of the dreaming. Last week we talked about contentment. Maybe for you, you don't know how to be content where you are at any point in the narrative. When stuff comes to fruition in your life, finally, still not content. In the now, when things haven't happened, still not content. And a lot of the issues that we struggle with that is because we get so nostalgic about the past or so hurt by the past that we can't get past it. Or we get so expectant about the future that we can't enjoy our life right now. And we stop looking at the blessings and everything we've got in our lives, and we find ourselves discontent, not happy. We got to make sure that our focus is where it needs to be. And so where we're taking this all in its conclusion is to this place of, okay, cool, I've filtered it, I'm finding contentment now, but how do I take steps? What does it look like to ultimately end up at that dream and seeing it accomplished? And what do I do then? And so that's what we're looking at. We've been looking at the life of Joseph in the Old Testament and everything he's been going through, most of which has been pretty terrible. And we're going to see what God has in store for him. But there's three things that you're going to see thematically show up in this discussion today. And for those of you who are visual learners, you're good to go, okay? I got something for you, all right? The rest of you, tough luck, I guess. I don't know. I'm visual, okay? Some people out there, you're like, I can see words, and you're like, I remember them. All I need to see is the words. For you, I say you have superpowers or something, because that just does not work for me. When they started taking the pictures out of the book, I was out. Like, I was just like, I don't understand. Like, that was the whole point of the book, right? Was the pictures. And they took it. Yeah, I'm visual. So for you who are visual with me, these are the things that I've kind of put together to help us. So do this with me. If you're online, do it yourself. If you're in the room, do this. So start with me. Point to your eyes. All right, point to your eyes. So perspective is the first theme. Perspective, so seeing, your perception. Next one is this. Tap your watch, or if you don't wear a watch anymore, because nobody does, tap your invisible watch on your wrist. You're like, Seth, you're so old school. I look at my phone. Yeah, tap your wrist. Timing is the next one. And then the final one is gifting. So do this, hands out, right? So we go perspective, timing, gifting, right? It's just one kind of fail swoop. There you go. Now, gifting we're talking about is your unique gifts and abilities, the things that you have that you are very good at. Maybe those are things you naturally are good at. Or maybe over time, they're a competency that you have learned and gained and are now good with. And so we're going to talk about all those things as they apply to Joseph and how he saw his dream accomplished and hopefully how you can see yours. Now, I'll tell you, when it comes to our perception, I talk about this pretty consistently when I speak. And the reason is there's a few things that you'll hear me repeat fairly regularly. And it's because they're significant and the repetition is necessary because they're common to universal human experience. And this statement is one I default to all the time, and it's your perception defines your reality. And it sounds like a very hokey kind of a life coach thing to say or something like that, or just positive thinking thing. And to a certain degree it is. And the reason that you hear that kind of verbiage in those kind of sectors is because it has some very biblical foundational reality to it and some substantial ground to stand on. Even last week, we looked at a passage that said, look, don't worry about tomorrow for it's got enough troubles of its own. Just focus on what God's got for you today. Other passages say, whatever's true, whatever's lovely, whatever's wonderful, think on such things. You're going to see time and time again throughout Scripture this idea of perception and being on the things that God would have for you. Good things, positive things. Because why? Because our perception becomes a reality. I'll give you an example, right? If you are a person who's ever lost a job, outside of it being a job you hated, it's normally not a fun experience. It's normally a pretty rough one, and normally you don't feel so great about yourself in some instances, especially if it's like you were terminated in some way. It tends to be rough. And if you're not careful, what can happen is you can begin to go, well, I'm not worthy. I'm just not good enough. I'm not going to be able to ever find a good job again. I'm never going to find one that's as good as this one was, or it pays as much. And you can get into this state of like depression and anxiety and overwhelmedness, and it's just going to get you to where you never feel like you can take the next step to do what? Go get another job. No, I'm not ready. I just really am not ready to go take that interview. I'm not going to step into that. I just don't. And then what's going to happen is you're going to be so focused on the bad part of it that you're literally going to cause the thing that you feared, not getting a job, to happen. It's called self-fulfilling prophecy. That's like Psych 101. I'll tell you one of the roughest times for some of you, if you're in here and this is you, I'm just going to go ahead and speak this in your life. One of the single most difficult times in your life is, and if you say it's not, you're a dirty liar, is middle school. Middle school was the pits. You're going to be fine if you're in here and you're in middle school. It's okay. You'll be fine. It's fine. I mean, it's going to be rough, but you're going to be fine. You got people that are around you. They're going to support you, love you. It's going to be a good deal. But I'm telling you right now, middle school's a weird time. You're figuring stuff out about yourself. Like you're having to learn how to socialize with people for the first time and who the mess you even are. And you're like, hey, I'm going to go talk to a girl for the first time. That went bad. Like it just never seems to work out for you, right? And for me, shocker, based on everything I really need to just like put up pictures of me as a kid. Because like I have been a work in progress for a long time, and I was an awkward one. Yeah, it was bad. I've told you, I rocked the bowl cut like Lloyd Christmas till I was 22. Like, it was a rough deal, okay? And so I'm in middle school. None of the ladies are like, that guy. Anybody see that bowl cut? I want to put my fingers through that bowl cut hair. Tell me about it. Yes, please. No, it didn't happen, all right? They weren't, knocking down on my door. And so I was sitting there wanting to find friends and hang out with people and all these things, and inevitably, it didn't happen in my timing, right, in the way I wanted it to. And my perception and whatnot was that I'm just victimized. Nobody wants to be friends with me. Everybody say, my mom had to sit me down and go, Seth, the world does not revolve around you. Hurtful. I don't know where you're going with this, but okay. And nobody is sitting at home. All these people got better things to do than to sit at home and be like, how shall we exclude Seth today? And you feel that way, though. In middle school, you just go, man, everybody's excluding me. Nobody wants to hang out with me. And here's the deal. The few that might actually do that, let me give you great advice, middle schoolers. Don't be friends with them. They are not good people. You don't want to be friends with those people. That's not a good deal. Yeah. So I began to recognize, okay, I don't need to step into that. I don't need to think about that. And God began to work in it. But you could get so in your head, even in middle school, that you could think that everybody's talking about you. You see so you're like, hey, Sandra, you stop talking about me right now. And they're like, we were not talking about you, but we are now, weirdo. What is that? You can just get so up in your head in so many ways that you can end up causing the thing you're worried about. The next one's timing. Timing is everything, people. You can talk to professionals and people, and they'll go back to the beginning of their career, and they'll be like, man, this perfect timed moment was what springboarded me. You hear all these celebrities, they'll get interviewed, they're like, the timing was such that I just got this role, and it just happened to work out in that exact moment, and that's springboarded my career. When I do Google searches to find info on these types of themes and stuff, when they come up in my topics, I always have fun with it, and this one in particular is fun because I timed in, timing is everything, or perfect timing. And what it is there's just a plethora of beautiful, amazing images. They're just absolutely fantastic of perfectly timed things. And I figured I'd share a few with you. So here's the first one for you, is this. Look at that mess. Moon arrow to the moon. That's, you had to do it for the gram on that one, had to. I don't know if you also noticed that it's a green light. So we're going to hope that they are not driving the vehicle right now as they're getting that for the gram. But you know what? It is what it is. Next one. I love this. There you go. Dog in a bubble. It's not really in a bubble. It's silly. Yeah, if it's anything like my dog, it's actually aggressively trying to attack all the bubbles right now, and that's how it got that perfectly timed photo. This next one's great. I love this. Oh, yeah, the perfectly timed handlebar mustache in the wrestling arena, which is very real, just so we're all on the same page. Yeah. I love the cartoonish nature of the handlebar mustache coupled with the very severe look on his face. Yeah, that works great. Final one is pertinent for us in the church right now. I love this. He has risen. There's Shrek rising in the background. I like to think that this church, when the Shrek movie came out, we're like, I just want the church meeting, everyone.
Lord's moving right now. I don't understand why, but there is a large amount of people who are just foot trafficking outside of our church, taking pictures of the cross. It is, praise Him. And then Shrek went away, and they were like, I don't know what has happened. It was just the timing of things. It just worked out, right? And it works that way in our lives. If you have any sort of doubt of the timing being perfect for stuff, I want to say a word to you that you will all immediately know what it is. Zoom. Anybody know what Zoom is now? Rewind time 7 months. Do you know what Zoom is? No. Most all of you did not know what Zoom was. You want to know why? Because Zoom didn't know that a global pandemic was going to happen, and everybody was going to be told, you know where you live now? Only in your house. And you, if you want to talk to other people, you got to figure out other ways. And so all of us started to try to find these telecommunication and video conferencing deals for our work, for our social lives, with our families. And these guys step into it. And then over the course of the last few months, they hedged out Microsoft for the #1 spot in that market. It's crazy. Rewind time, buy stock in that. Hello. But also, people take advantage of timing. Even in the midst of this crisis, what happened? We found out that toilet paper was as good as gold, and we found out that it was like society is built on the stuff, people, okay? And that and antibacterial stuff. And so people went to the shelves, and it was just gone. We just now got single-ply back, people. What is even happening? Yeah, if you find like double-ply toilet paper right now, that's a good day, all right? Yeah. And you go out, these people take it, but there was all these articles of these people who were going to like every Dollar General, every store within like 200 miles and buying up every bit of toilet paper, every bit of antibacterial stuff, stockpiling it and trying to sell it through secondary sellers for this massive upcharge. They were taking advantage of people because they had the timing. Now, thankfully, those secondary sellers shut them down, and now those people are sitting there with a billion bottles of, antibacterial stuff, and they're like, I don't know what to do with this. And it's called, well, you get what was coming to you, buddy, right? You're trying to take advantage of people in their time of need, but they were trying to be opportunistic, and they were approaching timing in the negative side of things. So what's the next thing when it comes to all that? The next one is your gifting. And the one thing you've got to do is you've got to figure out what you're gifted at so that you can use that as you're moving towards whatever you feel called to do, your dream that God has hopefully instilled in your heart. I can tell you right now, I thought so it's pretty daunting. Seniors out there in high school, it's pretty daunting when people look at you at that time. They're like, hey, you're going to college next year? And you're like, yeah, I'm psyched. Right now, you're like, I'm trying to figure out what college even means right now, but yes, sure, whatever. You need to figure out what you're going to do with your life, like now, so you can find a major and do that. And you're like, I feel like I don't know what that means. Yeah, that was the way I was. I changed majors like a billion times, but the reason for that was I started off, I was like, I know what I want to be. I want to be a doctor. Is it because I want to help people? Meh. Is it because they make a ton of money? You better believe it. Like, that was like where I was at that time. I was very mature, absolutely. No, not at all. My motives were wrong. But not to mention that, my gifting in no way aligned with it, all right? Because here's the deal. You walk into that first pre-med class your freshman year, and the guy goes, here's the deal. Look to your left, look to your right. One or both of them will be gone by the end of the semester. I'm like, it's going to be one of you, buddy. It was me. I failed out of that mess. I was not gifted. You got to be good at biology, people. They're like, hey, you're going to have to cut up a cadaver one day. You're like, what's a cadaver? No, this is not me, right? And if my whole existence, my whole everything had been wrapped up in that, and that I wanted to be a doctor, I would be pretty messed up right now when it comes to being fulfilled or feeling like I'd done any dream I was called to, because my gifting was no way in line with that, let alone I didn't have the right motives. And so you have to assess what your gifting is. And so when we sing all those things and bring them all together, it brings us to this one reality, this takeaway that I want you to have, and it's this. Living your God dream, your God-inspired dream, is characterized by, and hear me, this is where the visual stuff comes in, by godly perspective, divine timing, and unique gifting. And those descriptors that are attached to those are very intentional. So going after living your God-inspired dream is characterized by godly perspective, divine timing, and unique gifting. So let's look at our guy Joseph in Genesis and see what it is that he wants to tell us and show us, more importantly, about our lives and the God-inspired dreams we want to pursue. So Joseph, great life early on up until he was about 17. His brothers, who get tired of him because he wasn't really living in a way that was super loving to them, let alone in any other way. His character just really wasn't that solid. Ends up getting sold into slavery by his brothers. Just a big warm hug from the family. And he goes into slavery. if that wasn't bad enough, he gets framed for a crime he did not commit, and he gets thrown in prison, all while he's trying to glorify God, and that's where we pick up. So things are going great for Joseph. It's been a great story so far. Genesis 40, verse 1 says this. I need to go back up. Boop, boop, boop. There we go. 40, verse 1. Now, one thing I want you to know is that we're about to see Joseph use his gifting, use his things, use his timing in this journey for God's glory as other people step into the narrative. And I don't want you to miss out on that, so I want you to be preparing yourself to see what it is and be looking for in the text, before I even get to it, how he is using those things for the Lord. So sometime later, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt offended their masters. So this is Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. Pharaoh was angry with his two officials, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, and put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, in the same prison where Joseph was confined. And the captain of the guard assigned them to Joseph, and he attended them. So Joseph right now, as we learned last week, has been at each interval in his life, in the midst of even hard circumstances, he's living under the Lord, and in so doing, he gets elevated to positions of influence wherever he is. So he was kind of over the household when he was enslaved, and now when he's in prison, even the guy who's over the guards and that has put him over everyone in the prison. So he keeps living under the Lord, and even within those things, God's using some of those moments to train him up. What's going to happen now is that the cupbearer and the baker are each going to have a dream. And if you've been with us up to this point, you know that Joseph interacts with actual dreams. We're not talking about aspirational dreams. We're talking about literal, like put your head on the pillow dreams. And God uses him to reveal these things to him and go, this is what that means. And so Joseph already is about to have an opportunity to use some of the gifts that God has given him to give God glory. And so these guys go, we had this dream, and we don't know what to do about it, and here's what they are. And Joseph goes, okay, here's what's going on. Let me interpret those for you. Cupbearer, your dream means this. You're going to go back to Pharaoh, and he is going to put you right back in your position. Good deal. High five. Put it up here. Here's the deal. Understand, I'm not the one telling you this. This is a gift from God. You can check verse 8 of this passage, and it speaks to that. But do this for me. When you get back, remember me. That's all I ask. Remember me whenever you go before Pharaoh. He goes, okay, whatever. We'll see how it works. He goes to the baker. He goes, baker, a little bit on the bad news side for you, buddy. Here's the deal. So your dream means that you're going to get your head cut off and you're going to be put on a pike. Yeah, about that. Sorry, buddy. You need a hug? He says that's the case. So that's where we pick up in verse 20. Now, the third day was Pharaoh's birthday. Nothing like a good head chop off on your birthday. And he gave a feast for all his officials. He lifted up the heads of the chief cupbearer and the chief baker in the presence of his officials. That terminology meaning that he brought them before them. He's taken them out of the prison, putting them before the officials. He restored the chief cupbearer to his position so that he once again put the cup into Pharaoh's hand. But he impaled the chief baker just as Joseph had said to them in his interpretation. The chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. It's the only thing that Joseph asked him. Remember me. Understand, God did this for you, but remember me. And the thing that I think is something we don't need to miss out on every part of Joseph's narrative up to this point, and is on full display here as our first point, is this: pursuing God-inspired dreams means glorifying him at every step of the journey. Every step of the journey. And thus far, we're seeing Joseph do that. He's glorifying God in all these rough circumstances. Even when in glorifying God, it goes horribly, horribly wrong. Or in this instance, he gets zero credit, zero affirmation, nothing. He's like, hey man, I got one. I'm going to do this for you, for the glory of God, but for you, just do this one thing for me, and the guy doesn't. So the question you have to ask yourself, and I have to ask myself, is are we willing to consistently give God glory if things go bad? And I'm pretty sure you're not in your day and age going to experience slavery and imprisonment like back to back. Very unlikely. But beyond that, you probably are going to experience not getting credit for things. You are going to experience difficult stuff. You are going to be doing the right thing, and the wrong thing's going to happen to you. And the question is, in the midst of all that, are you still going to give God glory? Are you still going to remain faithful and trust in him that there's a plan you don't see? Scripture says what we now see in part, we will then see in full. It's the understanding. And just so you know, that passage is talking about once we're in heaven. So you're not even going to get to see the full picture ever until you're with the Lord. Why? Because we can't ever see the full expanse of our entire life. At any one moment, you can't. You can only ever see what you've experienced thus far. Which leads us to the next thing that we need to dive into. I'm going to tell you, point 2 that we're about to get to, I don't like point 2. It's my least favorite point because it hits me the most personally. And it's probably going to hit a lot of you too. What happens is that roughly 2 years pass. Pharaoh has 2 dreams himself. They're pretty rough. They mess him up and disturb him. He does not know what they mean, and he needs to figure out what's going on. And that's where we pick up. 41 verse 8. In the morning, namely Pharaoh's mind, was troubled, so he sent for all the magicians and wise men of Egypt. Pharaoh told them his dreams, but no one could interpret them for him. Then the chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, "Today I am reminded of my shortcomings. Pharaoh was once angry with his servants, and he imprisoned me and the chief baker in the house of the captain of the guard. Each of us had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. Now a young Hebrew was there with us, a servant of the captain of the guard. He told him our dreams, and he interpreted them for us, giving each man the interpretation of his dream. And things turned out exactly as he interpreted them to us. I was restored to my position, and the other man was impaled." Why did they have to give those descriptions? He could just say he was executed. Why do they got to give the descriptor every time? On your birthday. Do you remember that was your birthday party, remember? So Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and was quickly brought from the dungeon. And when he had shaved and changed his clothes, I do love that characteristic. He came before Pharaoh. Keep in mind, last week, if you remember, it characterized Joseph as this really hunky, good-looking dude. It literally said that about him. And this week, they're like, just so we're clear, he's Tom Hanks from Castaway. We got to get this dude cleaned up before we bring him before the ruler of the entire world. Yeah, he looks rough. This is not working out well. So they clean him up, and they bring him before Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I had a dream, and no one can interpret it. But I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it." Now understand, Joseph's been in prison. Just so you understand, when Joseph comes before Pharaoh, later on we learn that he is 30 years of age, okay? He was roughly 17 when he was thrown into slavery. So he has been either enslaved or in prison for the last 13 years, okay? He was 28 when he gave that dream to the cupbearer and them because it was 2 years prior is what it tells us. So he's been in prison for 13 years. He's had a rough get-up. Things are not looking well. And he is being brought before the ruler of the entire known world, whose own people view him as a deity, as a god, and he has the power to do anything to this guy. He could literally, Pharaoh could look at him and be like, "Let's just kill him." Or "Let's have him fight a cobra for my amusement." Anything. It doesn't matter, okay? Or he could go, "You're free." So probably choose your words wisely of what you're about to say the first thing to this guy. And this is what Joseph says. "I cannot do it. I can't. Sorry, I'm not the guy. I can't do it." But he did reply to Pharaoh, and he said this, "But God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires." So even in that moment, giving God glory, every step of the journey, he's got his opportunity. The timing is starting to align for him. Things are starting to add up. And he's stepping into it, but he's still giving glory to God. Point 2 is this, and it's the point I don't like. God's timing is rarely our timing, but it's always the right timing. I don't like that one. I don't know if you're my timing's great though. My timing in my mind is very perfect and necessary and good. And so if God could just get on my timing, that would be great and life would be much better. So God, if you could get, that's my prayer tonight. God, get on my timing, right? That prayer doesn't work out for you, just so we're all on the same page. It never feels like it's in our timing because, like I said, God sees fully what we only see in part. We can't see the forest for the trees, and God can. And can I just tell you that if you live long enough, and so many of you who have made it to even other next mile markers of your life, I'm sure could just give me all kinds of moments like this, but even as far as I've lived, I can point back and look at the most difficult things in my life and the timing of them and how God used them and realize that if it weren't for them, the best parts of my life wouldn't even exist, okay? Now, I could give you a lot of examples, but I'll give you one.
I would not, here's one for you. So let me describe what my whole life is to you right now, more or less in this way. I am Taylor's husband, I am Finley's dad, and I'm about to be Chloe's dad because we're pregnant with number 2. I work as a pastor in Metro Community Church in Edwardsville, Illinois, okay? That's a lot of who I am right now. And I need you to understand that if it weren't for the timing of one thing I'm about to tell you, I would not be any of those things that are the greatest parts of my life. First job I ever got in ministry was the transition away from it was very rough. There were a lot of reasons that I had to step out of it, but it was just a really rough situation, and it could have gone a lot better than it did, quite frankly. I felt very hurt by a lot of the ways that it was handled and the things were done. And maybe you've transitioned out of a position somewhere before and you've experienced that, and it just didn't have to be the way it was, unfortunately. But it was out of your hands, and things just went away that you just were very, bothered by, right? And that was the way it was. It was a very hurtful time, very, very much, and especially when you're sitting there like, hey, we're the church. Like, shouldn't this be like a little different? Like, shouldn't we be focusing on glorifying God in this and loving each other? Like, what is going on? And I was very just downtrodden by that, very hurt, very just anxious and struggling with what God was trying to do. Thankfully, a job had presented itself, and I was beginning to transition to it. Now, here's what you need to understand about that job. So when I stepped into it for a number of years, it's some of the most amazing years of ministry I look back on and so fondly in love. But the guy I ended up serving under was a guy by the name of Byron. He became a mentor. He was my boss, all these things. And Byron, today now, is also known as my uncle-in-law. And the position that I stepped into as Byron is my supervisor, you need to understand, 2 years earlier when I started ministry was available. But I wasn't qualified. And I needed 2 years of learning and growing before I would even be a recognized candidate for the position, okay? So if I'd tried 2 years prior and not gone through the rough stuff that I went through, I wouldn't have gotten the job. If I waited 2 years after that, or even a year, there would have been no job, most likely. And as time progressed and I began to grow in who I was as a leader and as a person and as a pastor, I also got to hang out at Byron's house, and there was this picture of this really hot girl on his fridge. I said hot back then. I don't now. I'm more mature than that. But back then, I did. And I would mess with him about it constantly. I was like, who's the hottie on your fridge? He was like, that's my niece. You need to just be quiet, Seth. And I'm like, just messing with him. But then I realized I might meet this girl. So we stopped making jokes because he got very real. And so I asked her out. We date. We get married. She's my wife, mother of my children. I have kids with her. It's a whole thing, okay? And none of that, hear me, would even be in my life if it weren't for the timing of God and the awful things I had to walk through that led to the plan that he had all along, okay? His timing is perfect, even though you don't like it, even though it isn't yours, even though you don't realize what's coming together, but you got to stay faithful to him every step of the journey. And hopefully you can sit back and look at what he's done. And understand, I just told you, Joseph is 30. He's been in prison and slavery for 13 years. You and I want God to give us our answer a month from now or sooner. He had to wait 13 years before he even had an opportunity to get out from under this. But God's timing was right where it needed to be. And we're going to see why his timing was so perfect right now. So Joseph interprets Pharaoh's dream, and he says, look, there's going to be 7 years of abundance, meaning we're going to have tons of crops, everything's going to be awesome, but then there's going to be 7 years of famine, and they're going to be so bad, nobody's going to even remember that there were 7 good years. And he begins to unfold this plan for Pharaoh. And he says, look, you need to collect all this stuff. You need to get all these things and create these storehouses, and people, not only in Egypt, but from everywhere, are going to come and need help, and we're going to provide it for them, and that's what you need to do. So this is the plan he provides for them, and I'm going to kind of skip forward to verse 37 right here of Genesis 41. And so when he presents this plan to Pharaoh, Pharaoh says, the plan seemed good to Pharaoh and to all his officials. So Pharaoh asks them, can we find anyone like this man, one in whom is the Spirit of God? Hello, he didn't say one in whom has a good plan. He said one in whom has the Spirit of God. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has made all this known to you, God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you. Joseph
in slavery, faithful to God. He keeps using his skills and abilities, and he gets elevated to a position of influence over that household, all right? He's learning the logistical things, coming up with plans. How do we work as an organization of this household? Goes into prison, doesn't give up, keeps working to God. Slowly but surely makes it up in that chain of events, right? He's overseeing the prison, logistically overseeing that, coming up with plans for it. He gets put before the leader of the known world, uses the gift God has given him to speak this into Pharaoh's life, but it isn't just there, okay? It wasn't just his character of being a godly man and leaning into the gifting that God had him. It was him harnessing the competencies and the gifts that he had and using them because he had a plan on the back end of what God was doing. So 3 is this: God-inspired dreams are empowered by our character and our competence. That's our unique gifting we were talking about. Are you going to use the skills and abilities you've acquired, the natural giftings you just intrinsically have? Are you going to have character that's godly, focused on the Lord and what you're doing? And so people can see that and cling to that and understand that you're not just about you, you're about something more than you? And then are they going to see that you are good at the things that you are gifted with and that you take them seriously and lean into that? You're not slothful about what you do. You're intentional and you consistently are leaning into what God would have for you. It's going to require that. So we see Joseph doing all that. And the timing is perfect because he's brought before Pharaoh literally before what is this 14-year arc, and it's about to hit. And they're about to get the 7 years in that, and it's the timing is perfect, and Joseph is using who he is, stepping into that for the glory of God. And God is beginning to form this plan fully into what it's supposed to be. So what happens is that everything Joseph said happens. 7 years of abundance happen. They put these storehouses together. They're getting all this food, and literally everyone at the end of that has to come to them because for 2 years, up to where we're about to jump in, there's been famine. So 7 years of abundance, now 2 of famine. Do the math right now, and Joseph is what? He was 30, so 7, 8, 9. So he's 39, almost 40 years old right now. So he's getting much older. He has not seen his family since he was roughly 17, okay? What occurs is that everyone from all over is having to show up to get the food. And guess who ends up showing up at his doorstep? The brothers that sold him into slavery. They show up. They don't recognize him. This guy in just complete, they're just assuming he's dead at this point. And he sends them on all these kind of different, things to do and tasks to do. And he finally decides that he's going to reveal who he is to his brothers. And this is what he says. Genesis 45, verse 1. Then Joseph could no longer control himself before all his attendants, and he cried out, "Have everyone leave my presence." So there was no one with Joseph when he made himself known to his brothers. And he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard him, and Pharaoh's household heard about it. So literally, he's like, "Everyone leave except for these men." And they left, and he just breaks down, cries, hard cries. And they're out the door, and they're like, "I don't know what's happening there, but I'm telling Pharaoh. I'm telling all this. It's crazy. Gossip." 3, Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still living?" But his brothers were not able to answer him because they were terrified at his presence. They're like, "We about to die. This is the guy we sold into slavery, second most powerful in the world right now. We about to die." Then Joseph said to his brothers, "Come close to me." They're like, "Yep, we are about to die. Yep, coming closer." When they had done so, he said, "I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt." It's just getting more aggressive, right? They're like, "Oh, this doesn't go well." Quick turn. "And now do not be distressed, and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here." This is nuts. "Because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. For 2 years now, there has been famine in the land, and for the next 5 years, there will be no plowing and reaping. But God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So then, it was not you who sent me here, but God. He made me father of Pharaoh, lord of his entire household, and ruler of all Egypt." Here's an interesting fun fact that affects us here directly before. I've pointed this out loosely in the past, but this is a great time to do it. If you're tuning in online or this, and you live in the Metro East area, this area was found originally by, some of you might not even know this, you're like, you're not even from here, Seth, what in the world? Well, I like researching things. Was actually found by a Baptist preacher, this area. And he came to the area and he looked on the area east of the river and he said, man, this is just abundant and beautiful and awesome. This is God's land, and I will call it Goshen. And so that's why you see Goshen everywhere. And literally right here in verse 7, he says, but God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth. And in later verses, he claims that that remnant is known as Goshen. And that's where that name comes from. And that's why we now live in a place that is in many respects called Goshen. And now you have Goshen coffee, and it's fantastic. Yeah. And so God uses this in a powerful way in Joseph's life to protect his family and to make a place for them. But instead of blaming them, instead of holding against them, instead of getting his, quite frankly, just revenge, he looks at it and he finally sees the full picture and he is grateful, which brings us to our final point, is this: the proper posturing of accomplishment is gratefulness. When you get to the end of your narrative, your story, whatever that looks like, and you finally see what it is God has for you, are you just going to be like, wow, I deserve it, or, this is great, right? Or, no, like, you got to look back and be grateful. That perspective of gratefulness is huge. Even in the now, you've got to be grateful for what was to find your contentment here and now. My wife and I are beginning to do this more and more in our lives, and it's just been a blessing. We just didn't do it intentionally early on, but this posturing of thankfulness is transformational in your life, okay? I mean, she texted me this morning in the middle of worship, was like, man, I'm just so thankful for this. I mean, she just listed the things and spoke this encouragement in my life. And I got to sit there when we sang that worship song earlier that talks about the goodness of God. And I get to go, that's who you are, God. I've got so much mess happening in my life. And I've been transparent about that to so many of you and into this microphone, right? It's so much rough stuff. But I can still stop and go, he's still good. And I'm so thankful. Thankful for my wife. I'm thankful for my children. I'm thankful for this job. I'm thankful for you. I'm thankful that in the midst of a global pandemic, we still have a church, people. It didn't stop just because something came up. We kept going because God's bigger than anything that's going to come our way, okay? And I'm thankful for that. So don't you dare take any of it for granted. Firmly position yourself on the gospel of Jesus Christ and recognize chiefly what he did for you on the cross, and step from that positioning into a place of recognition and gratefulness, so that every step of the journey you're able to have the right perspective, that when the timing happens perfectly finally, that you're able to look at it and go, look, this is God's timing. I see it now. I didn't see it before, but I see it now. And that you can go at every part of it. I'm going to use the gifts God's given me. I'm going to point him glory. I'm going to keep on learning and developing. And I'm going to be thankful. Living your God-inspired dream. It's characterized by godly perspective, divine timing, and unique gifting. So let's step into that. Will you step into that? What are your motives? Are you finding contentment? And at every step of it, are you finding what that dream looks like to lead to that God-inspired dream? Be thankful. Because he does have a dream for you. Scripture says that he has a plan for you. It's a plan to prosper you, not to harm you. A plan for a hope and for a future. But you've got to get a grip on the now before you ever get to that future. And take those steps where God's leading. And if we do that, it's going to be amazing to see everything he does. Let's pray. Father in heaven, I thank you that you are a God who wants us to be content, who even when we don't feel like we have a dream for ourselves, you have a dream for us, and you look at us and say, no, this is what I want for you. And I pray that we will recognize that our motives will be pure, that we will recognize what you did through Jesus on the cross. You died for our sins. My trespasses, the things I've done wrong, so that even though I screw up and things are right, that my motivation will change, that it will become about glorifying you and not about glorifying me. that I can begin to follow you daily. Make you the Lord of my life, the ruler of all that I am. And I can step into your will and your plan, because it's good and it's faithful. Yesterday and today and forever. Lord, as we sing this last song, may our voices be lifted high to you. May our hearts reflect on who you are. May we think of the things we should be thankful for in our lives now and be expectant of you moving in every day. In your name we pray, amen.